Hey, Josh here. The woke gender ideology has spread worldwide to challenge traditional norms and promote inclusivity, equality, and social justice regarding gender and identity. But how logical is this ideology? What do sex and gender mean? Can people become the opposite sex? And is gender a social construct? Let's find out. Before we start, I know I'll be getting a lot of hate for making this video, especially when I talk about different genders. So, for there not to be any issues, I'll be identifying as omnigender. Because of this, my pronouns are everyone and everybody, and I expect everyone to use those pronouns in the comments. More so throughout the past few years, a question's been asked that stumped a lot of people. That is, what is a woman? This question has been asked multiple times in hearings.
So you give me an example of a woman, you say that you are a woman. Can you tell me, otherwise can you tell me what a woman is?
Yes, I'm telling you, I'm a woman.
Is that as comprehensive a definition as you can give me?
That's as comprehensive as the definitions as I will give you today.
What do you say a woman is?
I believe that everyone can identify for themselves.
Definition of a man, definition of a woman. Anyone?
It's pretty basic.
Basic stuff. Professor Murphy.
I think there are a variety of definitions, and I think
Just a simple
perhaps to give a more fulsome answer, we should take that on notice.
You're going to take on notice the question of what a woman is.
No, well, there are a variety. It's a very contested space at the moment, Senator.
It's not just a woman who's born a woman.
But there are definitions in terms of how people identify themselves. So.
Some other ways people have answered the question have been, a woman is someone who identifies as a woman, or a woman is a woman. There are a few problems with this. Firstly, when defining terms, there's a rule not to use the term in the definition. If I were to ask someone what is a dog, and they replied, a dog is a dog, I still have no idea what it is.
Oh, are you gonna throw a ball? Oh, please throw a ball.
Another answer that's given to the question, what is a woman, is this.
So you're saying if you're not a woman, then you shouldn't have an opinion?
Where does a guy get a right to say what a woman is? Women only know what women are.
There are two issues with this answer. You see, you don't need to be something to know what it is. I'm sure you're able to know what a dog or a cat is, right? This answer also creates a logical fallacy. If the statement, you need to be a woman to know what a woman is true, then trans women aren't women, as they wouldn't be able to transition into a woman if them previously being men don't know what a woman is. The opposite also applies to trans men if the only way for you to know what a man is for you to be a man. The thing is, you need to be able to define something if you want to identify as it, because how can you identify as something if you don't know what it is? If you disagree with that, here's an example. Let's say that I wanted to identify as pansexual. I think you all know where this is going. Now, what if I thought a pansexual meant someone who's attracted to cooking pans? Can I still identify as one? If your answer is no because that's not what a pansexual is, then why do I need to define it but one does not need to know the definition of a man to become a trans woman or the definition of a woman to become a trans man? On top of that, why can't I make my own meaning of a pansexual, but trans men and trans women can do precisely that for men and women? Is it not disrespectful to the sex they're identifying as? During a hearing in America, Senator Marsha Blackburn asked Judge Ketanji Brown Jackson this question.
Can you provide a definition for the word woman?
Can I provide a definition? No.
Yeah.
I can't.
You can't?
Not in this context.
So
I'm not a biologist.
The meaning of the word?
Regarding the last statement, a good way to know if it's logical or not is to apply it to other things to see if it holds up. Do I need to be a mechanic to define what a car is? Do I need to be a veterinarian to define what a dog is? Do I need to be a mathematician to answer 2 + 2? By her saying that you need to be a biologist to know what a woman is, she's implying that a woman is defined by biology, invalidating the other answers we've previously discussed. A better answer she could have given would have been a biological answer to the biological question, as you don't need to be a biologist to remember a biological answer, hence why I know 2 + 2 = 4, even though I'm not a mathematician.
A lot of boring math later.
Regarding the terms sex and gender, I've seen that they are viewed in 3 different ways. Either sex and gender are the same thing that can't be changed, there's the same thing that can be changed, or both of them are different things, with sex being unchangeable and gender being changeable. Because definitions can change all the time, I looked at my Collins dictionary. Yes, it's close to Collis, but not exactly. Sex is defined as the state of being either male or female, and gender is the state of being male, female, or neuter. Those could be considered the original definitions for the words, but today's definitions are quite different. Sex refers to the physical and biological aspects of an individual, which makes someone biologically male or female, such as chromosomes, hormones, and reproductive anatomy. Sex is typically assigned at birth. We can be assigned as either male, female, or intersex. Gender refers to the socially constructed roles, expectations, and behaviors that are often ascribed to the different sexes. Gender identity is a personal internal perception of oneself and is based on socially constructed roles, behaviors, and customs. And so, the gender category someone identifies may not match the sex they were assigned at birth. Simply put it, sex is biological and gender is self-perceived. While sex is objective, gender is subjective. I will clarify that the doctor does not decide what the sex of the baby is to be. It's not as if the doctor is like, the last baby I chose female, so this time I'll choose male. No, all they do is look at the genitalia, and if the baby has a penis, it's assigned male, and if it's a vagina, it's assigned female. Because we'll be looking at the woke gender ideology, the modern definitions of the words will be used. Do you think sex and gender are the same thing or different? With sex, there are males and females, and typically males have XY chromosomes and females have XX chromosomes. From this chromosomal difference, males have a penis and females have a vagina and breasts. You can even tell the sex of the baby before anything has formed, right after the sperm fertilizes the egg and becomes a zygote. The genitals are the most obvious differences, and these two articles have many other physical and mental differences. But Josh, you may say, male and female chromosomes are not binary because there can be variations. Not exactly, but before that's explained, let's quickly go through those variations. Some of the most common ones are XXX syndrome causes an extra X chromosome in females, Turner syndrome only one X chromosome in females, Klinefelter syndrome an extra X chromosome in males, or XYY syndrome an extra Y chromosome in males. Lesser common or rare examples are these variations. While there can be differences in the number of chromosomes present, there are two specific reasons for what makes a sex a sex. The first one is gametes. Gametes are reproductive cells that unite to form a new cell called a zygote. Many gametes are sperm and female gametes are ova, also known as eggs. Chromosomes have the genes to determine a person's sex. Because of this, chromosomes are not what makes a sex, but what develops from these chromosomes. For there to be a third sex, a third type of gamete would need to exist, having these three requirements. It must be a haploid, meaning it contains only one set of chromosomes. It must be capable of fusing with another gamete to form a diploid zygote, and it must be produced by meiosis, which is a specialized form of cell division that reduces the chromosome number by half. While certain species of lizards, insects, and fish can produce a gamete through parthenogenesis that is not distinctively male or female, this gamete is not typically considered a third sex. This is because parthenogenesis is an asexual process that does not involve the fusion of two gametes, as in sexual reproduction. As a result, these organisms do not have separate sexes in the way that sexually reproducing organisms do. The reason for bringing up parthenogenesis gametes is because I have a feeling that if I don't, people will try to suggest that because other gametes exist in other organisms, it somehow applies to humans, even though humans only have two gametes.
And you cannot compare.
Let's bring back those chromosomal variations. Even though we have all these variations, they only produce one of two gametes, male or female. Why is this? Well, it's because of something called the SRY gene. This gene, typically located on the Y chromosome, is responsible for the male development of internal and external genitalia. Without it, female development of the internal and external genitalia occurs. There are possibilities of a translocation of the SRY gene where it is on the X chromosome resulting in a male with two X chromosomes, or if the SRY gene is inactive, it'll result in a female with XY chromosomes. Even though a person can have 5 X chromosomes, they are still female. Even though intersex people may have any of these variations, they are still male or female because chromosomes and their variations are not the defining factor of a person's sex. What makes a sex isn't chromosomes, but it's the SRY gene and the gamete that develops. Even if, hypothetically, the defining factor for sex is the combination of chromosomes, this still wouldn't mean sex is a spectrum, because people are supposed to either have male or female chromosomes, and approximately 99% of them do. Think of it like this. When defining human characteristics, we say humans have 2 eyes, 2 ears, 2 arms, 2 legs, 1 head, you get the idea. but if an organism is born with 2 heads, which happened to this person, No, it's 2 people. These people. Anyway, that is not to say that now the biology books should define humans as having 2 heads. 1, this only happens to a very small percentage of people, and as such, it wouldn't make a lot of sense to describe the entire population because of this extremely rare condition. And 2, humans genetically are supposed to have only 1 head, so the number of heads people can have is not a spectrum. Also, I'll state that this condition does not make them less human or not human. Similar to chromosomes, individuals who differ from the standard definition of a human wouldn't change it, but would instead be considered exceptions to the norm. People will say that because there are chromosome variations, sex is binary, but chromosomes is the basic explanation of what makes a sex a sex. The more complicated explanation is what's inside of them and what that creates. That's like using the basic definition of a vehicle, which is something that can carry or transport stuff, and then claiming a bicycle is a vehicle. But if you were to know the more complicated definition, a self-propelled mode of transportation powered by an engine or motor designed for use on public roads, a bicycle is not considered a vehicle. A similar thing happened when deciding if Pluto is a planet. Now, you might have heard of the statement that some women can have penises, but an even more well-known statement is that men can have periods. I'm pretty sure there are better options of pants to wear than white pants.
You may be wondering why the red suit. Well, that's so bad guys can't see me bleed.
Men getting periods is misleading for 2 reasons. They don't always mean that biological men can have periods, but trans men can. And they don't always mean that biological men bleed from their penis, but can experience period-like symptoms. This article suggests that men's 24-hour hormone cycle symptoms or irritable male syndrome is the same as women's 28-day period symptoms. There's a difference between experiencing bleeding during a period and experiencing period symptoms.
It's not the same.
Do you know those labor pain simulators that mostly men can get subjected to? Yeah, it's like men putting that on and then saying, I'm having the same pain that women have while in labor, so it must mean I'm in labor. No, you're not. While IMS in men can cause similar symptoms to a woman's period, it doesn't mean they're having a period. Biological men don't bleed as it requires a uterus and a female reproductive organ. There's still the physical part of periods that biological men, regardless of how they identify, will never be able to experience. If a biological man bleeds from the penis, you need medical help. That's not a period. Because of this controversy, trans women believe that they have periods.
I am a transgendered woman. I go by she, her, they, them pronouns. And I can tell you right now, my period I experience every month is very real, very valid, and very painful.
On TikTok, there have been videos of trans women experiencing periods. Also, some women like Jeffrey Marsh believe that the determining factor of someone's ability to menstruate is how they identify. Here's a clip of that and a practitioner explaining why that is not the case.
And as someone who does not menstruate, I'm non-binary, I don't menstruate.
Okay, real talk from a real practitioner. No, Jeffrey, the reason isn't that you do not menstruate is not because you're non-binary. It doesn't matter how you choose to dress, it doesn't matter who you choose to sleep with, it doesn't matter how you choose to identify. The reason you will never menstruate is because you are a biological male.
If you don't have the parts, you can't perform the function. Now, I'm not sure if this is real, but some trans women have gone so far in trying to have a period that they freeze tomato juice in ice cube trays to mimic the flow and discharge. Because this type of stuff is barely seen at all, it's hard to know whether it's a joke or... Hold up. Where do they put it?
I'm gonna need you to take these seeds into the bathroom, and I'm gonna need you to put them way up inside your butthole, Morty.
In my butt?
Put them way up inside there, as far as they can fit.
Oh, jeez, Rick.
Conversely, because women have been transitioning to men, it has created the idea that men can get pregnant.
I'm pregnant.
It's at a point where it's also been questioned multiple times during different hearings.
Dr. Kumar, can biological men become pregnant and give birth?
So men can have pregnancies, especially trans men.
Do you believe then that men can become pregnant and have abortions?
Yes.
Can men get pregnant?
Mr. Chairman, no.
Can men get pregnant?
I'm not aware of it.
You've referred to people with a capacity for pregnancy. Would that be women?
Many women, cis women, have the capacity for pregnancy. Many cis women do not have the capacity for pregnancy. There are also trans men who are capable of pregnancy, as well as non-binary people who are capable of pregnancy.
The woke's argument for why men can get pregnant is because trans men can get pregnant. However, the reason men can't get pregnant is the same reason men can't have periods. It doesn't matter how they identify. If someone is not a biological woman, no pregnancy or period can occur. When the woke hear this, they tend to say that's not true because not all biological women at a childbearing age can get pregnant. Yes, while not all biological women can, it's usually because of an abnormality. They were supposed to be able to, but something went wrong. Men, however, are never able to. They could get surgeries to have an artificial womb placed inside and other necessary things to bear a child. But there's a vast difference between women being able to do it naturally, born with the ability to do it, and an artificial womb. Sometimes the argument is made that if a woman is defined as someone who can become pregnant, a woman who can't get pregnant must not be a woman. Becoming pregnant is one of many things that makes a woman, and it does not mean that they're less of a woman if they can't. Trans men can live their life like men, but they're still biological women, and them simply identifying as men doesn't mean that biological men can now do something that is biologically impossible, or that everyone should be saying that men can get pregnant. A biological woman identifying as a man and saying, "Look at me, men can get pregnant," is no different to said person identifying as a bird and saying, "Look at me, birds can give birth to eggless babies." The reality is that the biology of men and women doesn't change and won't, because we don't have the technology to do that right down to the bones and the cells of the person. We also haven't evolved like clownfish, bluehead wrasse, or oysters to do so. Let's say, even hypothetically, that biological men could get pregnant. There's still the issue of the difference between the male and female pelvises. As you can see on this hands-on exhibit, each ball mechanism and the pelvis bones are positioned the same, but the only difference is the bone structure. The ball can't go through the male pelvis because it isn't wide enough, and here's a clearer comparison. Even though you could literally take the pelvis bones from a deceased male and female and see the difference, a professor went viral for this response.
So if you were to dig up a human, two humans, and 100 years from now, both man and woman, could you tell the difference? Strictly off of bones.
No. Because people would rather affirm someone's identity than confront facts, it means situations like this can happen. Not all ovarian cancer victims are women, and Canadian Cancer Society recommends cervical cancer screenings for men who identify as women. If a person doesn't have a cervix or ovaries, there is no point to be screened regardless of their identity, as they can't get ovarian cancer. Also, here are 3 examples of articles stating how biological men have been asked if they can get pregnant. This idea of men getting pregnant has gone so far to the point where a university in Scotland was teaching their midwifery students how to care for biological men who are giving birth, as they assert that men could give birth through their penis. While most times the birthing person will have female genitalia, you may be caring for a pregnant or birthing person who is transitioning from male to female and may still have external male genitalia. You may need to be familiar with the catheterization procedure for both female and male anatomy. There is not one example ever of a biological male giving birth. Not one. Where would the baby even grow? In the bladder? The penis also doesn't stretch, unlike the vaginal canal, so unless the baby is smaller than a tic tac, it would tear the dick apart.
Many tic tacs later.
The next subject to talk about is trans brains, and I think this next video is a good introduction to it. By the way, I couldn't find the original video because I think the account went private, so I've used the video of Brett Cooper reacting to the original video.
Transgendered women are biologically women, though, in their brain. It's just the body didn't match up, okay? And there's scientific proof of this. And this is why we need the distinction between cisgendered and transgendered, because biologically, we're the same.
Now, either the study wasn't shown in the original video or it was cut out for the reaction, but I found this study conducted by Dr. Julie Baker in the Netherlands that suggests that the brain activity and structure of transgender adolescents resembles their desired gender. It states that it examines sex differences in the brain activation patterns of young transgender people. The study included both adolescent boys and girls with gender dysphoria and used magnetic resonance imaging scans to assess brain activation patterns in response to a pheromone known to produce gender-specific activity. The pattern of brain activation in both transgender adolescent boys and girls more closely resembled that of non-transgender boys and girls of their desired gender. In addition, GD adolescent girls showed a male typical brain activation pattern during a visual spatial memory exercise. Finally, some brain structural changes were detected that were also more similar but not identical to those typical of their desired gender of GD boys and girls. Dr. Baker says, although more research is needed, we now have evidence that sexual differentiation of the brain differs in young people with GD, as they show functional brain characteristics that are typical of their desired gender. There's a question about this study that could either help or break it, and that is, what caused the brain difference? Is it because of the way trans people feel that changes the brain activation pattern, or did factors like hormone replacement therapy, the environment, the child's development during birth, etc. change it? If it's the latter, then the question now becomes, do they legitimately feel trans, or is this brain difference causing them to think they're trans when they might not be if their brain were normal? For example, studies have been conducted on the brain differences between psychopaths and non-psychopaths. A study researching the structural and functional differences in the brains of people diagnosed with psychopathy examined two parts of the brain. The study showed that psychopaths have reduced connections between the ventromedial prefrontal cortex, the part of the brain responsible for sentiments such as empathy and guilt, and the amygdala, which mediates fear and anxiety. Two types of brain images were collected. Diffusion tensor images showed reduced structural integrity in the white matter fibers connecting the two areas, while a second type of image that maps brain activity, a functional magnetic resonance image, showed less coordinated activity between the VMPFC and the amygdala. This puts into question whether these psychopaths are psychopathic because that's just how they are, or because of their brain abnormality. If these studies are similar in how brain differences can impact a person's personality, then you wouldn't do the same thing with trans people that's done with psychopaths. You wouldn't affirm their feelings and beliefs, but instead, you would encourage them to seek medical help. There's another problem with this transgender brain study, and that is, it's biological. The transgenderism ideology has been centered around the idea that biology doesn't matter regarding someone's gender expression, and that their feelings are above biology, facts, logic, and common sense.
More feeling!
If this argument of trans brains is to be considered, well then, all of the other biological differences between men and women need to be discussed too, and not just in instances where the science is in their favor. Otherwise, science is not being conducted properly and is instead being used as a tool to fuel an agenda, rather than to discover the possible truths of the universe. Cherry-picking studies is not science. Also, studies like this can't confirm whether trans people are the gender they desire to be, but actually give a biological explanation behind gender dysphoria. That it's not just a feeling, but possibly because there's something physically or mentally wrong with their brain. Speaking of feelings, if you feel like pressing the like button, I would absolutely appreciate it so this video can spread and help more people. Thank you. Look, men and women can identify however they want, but it doesn't mean that they are what they identify as. A woman can identify as a man, but she is still a biological woman, and a man can identify as a woman, but he is still a biological man. I can identify as a horse or a wolf, but I am still a human. Thinking something does not make it true, wanting something does not make it real. Just because someone dresses like a woman or a man doesn't mean they are what they dress up as. A wolf in sheep's clothing is still a wolf. Here are a few other points to quickly mention. LGBTQ stands for lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender, and queer. Though, how are they possible together when LGB is about women liking women, men liking men, and men and women liking men and women, but T and Q won't say what a man or a woman is? LG and B are based on biology, while T and Q deny biology. If trans men are men and trans women are women, why aren't they just called men and women? You wouldn't call me a trans man because I'm a biological man, and you wouldn't call a biological woman a trans woman. To expand further on the previous point, Have you noticed that biological women don't identify as trans women and biological men don't identify as trans men? Are they not acknowledging their biological sex by only identifying as the opposite one? What would that mean if someone identified that way?
This doesn't make a lick of sense.
How would you identify as something when the identity you want to identify as requires you to be something you're not? Lastly, while non-binary means a person whose gender identity is neither entirely male or female, it's ironic how these situations happen. Non-binary is supposed to be a way for people to stray away from the gender binary system, but calling yourself non-binary categorizes everyone as binary or non-binary, thus creating a binary system, which makes you binary again. It might not be the same binary, but it's a binary system nonetheless. When talking about gender, the woke say that it's a social construct, and to understand what this means, let's look at this video by A. Wild.
There's kind of this misinformation that gender is something that is included in human nature, that it's universal across our species, and that based on the fact it's universal, it should be able to be enforced. But how could it be universal when cultures across the world have different gender systems? For example, in India, there's effectively a binary system consisting of men and women, but there's a third gender called the Hijra that's been recognized in India since the 8th century. That doesn't really sound like Western culture's interpretation of gender. Another example is that some Native American cultures recognize two-spirit individuals. And it has a special significance to those cultures that I won't speak to because it's not my experience, but it's not a bad thing in those cultures to be a two-spirit person. There are also people in Chile who believe that in order to do certain tasks, you need to channel a certain gender. And that's their belief about the way gender operates. So lots of other cultures around the world have space in their interpretation of gender for gender variance. If gender was universal, if it was something inherent, if it was something that all people were born with an understanding of, then we would expect to see it universally across cultures. And since we don't see it universally across cultures, that means that it can't be universal, and instead that it's culturally constructed from culture to culture.
Well, actually, cultures for thousands of years have mostly seen gender as only being male and female. Yes, it's not universal, but it doesn't need to be for gender to not be a social construct. Cultures like Hinduism or Buddhism believe humans have a third eye chakra. But if we're to use the same logic, then it would imply that because the belief that humans have two eyes isn't universal, it's a social construct. Cultures like India believe in a third gender, but upon further research, this third gender to them is what we see as transgender or intersex people, and we've already gone through that. If gender is a social construct, it would be different in countless countries throughout time, not just a few examples. It would be as culturally diverse as marriage, but gender is not that vastly different. I think what confuses people on whether gender is a social construct or not is what's being classified as social constructs. When looking at stereotypes, knowing why it's a stereotype is essential. People who say gender is a social construct will bring up examples like boys like blue and girls like pink, or boys prefer trucks and cars and girls like dolls. It's still being determined whether biology plays a role in this, and it's important if it does. While these two studies concluded that these preferences are not related to biology, a 2002 study showed that vervet monkeys have the same sex typical toy preferences as humans, even down to how the toys were played with. Even though these monkeys were never socialized by humans and had never seen these toys prior to their study, the preferences were very similar. Another example of what's said to be a social construct is that men are stronger than women. If social constructs like this were just made up, they wouldn't apply so well with other animals. Gorillas, elephants, orangutans, lions, and elk are among many animals where most males are stronger than females. There are animals like rattlesnakes, anacondas, and spotted hyenas where most females are stronger, but this is less common than the reverse.
Stereotype busted!
The issue is that these two examples are clumped together as if they're both gender social constructs, but they're different. One is based on stereotypes, while the other one is based on biology. Implying that they're the same is like saying all pit bulls are inherently aggressive or dangerous, and dogs have a highly developed sense of smell are both dog social constructs. The biology of males and females of any animal are not social constructs. Society didn't create them. It's not like society was like, who should we make stronger on average, males or females? How should we design male and female pelvises? No, our physical differences are just how the sexes are born. No stereotype or expectation connected to biology is a social construct. If you really think about it, biological constructs are more like godly, evolutionary, or extraterrestrial constructs. It depends on your beliefs about the origins of humans. Something that was maybe initially said back in March of 2022 by Blaze Media, but since then has been tweaked a bit, is this. If 10 men and 100 women were stranded on an island, 100 years later you'll find a society of men, women, and children. If 10 men and 100 trans women were stranded on an island, 100 years later you'll find the bones of 110 men. That's not transphobic to say, it's just indisputable facts because it 100% will happen.
These ain't opinions, these are facts.
When discussing gender social constructs, it's also important to discuss its connection with children. Articles like these suggested that boys can play with girls' toys and girls can play with boys' toys. This could be seen as one of the first steps taken to dismantle the belief of gender social constructs. But as the years went on, it slowly changed. Now, if a girl likes boys' things or a boy likes girls' things, instead of being tomboys and femboys, they're said to have been born in the wrong body, not just them being masculine girls or feminine boys. It's also said that children know they're trans before birth.
A child will often know that they are transgender from the moment that they have any ability to express themselves, and parents will often tell us this. We have parents who tell us that their kids, they knew from the minute they were born practically, and actions like refusing to get a haircut or standing to urinate, trying to stand to urinate, refusing to stand to urinate, trying on siblings' clothing, playing with the quote opposite gender toys, things like that.
How is it that children know they're trans before they're born, something that adults struggle with, but don't know how to play a simple game like hide and seek? Boys and girls cannot simply like other gendered toys anymore without being labeled as transgender. And ironically, if a boy plays with trucks and a girl plays with dolls, it's seen as something that must be changed, otherwise gender social constructs are being enforced. What originally started as a simple way to oppose gender social constructs ended up fueling those constructs even more, but mildly different.
Some would say I'm the reverse.
What it's evolved into is what makes a boy transgender are just the same gender social constructs for what makes a girl, and what makes a girl transgender are the same gender social constructs for what makes a boy a boy. In the attempt to not restrict children in gender social constructs, they've ended up restricting children in what I like to call modern gender woke constructs. Now, if a child does anything that's not stereotypical of their biological sex, or others would say what the child was assigned at birth, they're considered transgender. If they actually wanted to move away from gender social constructs, they would have been applied to no one and just allowed boys and girls to be boys and girls who played with any gendered toys. It makes you question whether the articles were written just so parents would be enticed to implement them, and when they do, they then say the kids must be transgender because of their interest in opposite gendered toys. They will claim that transgender women are women born in the wrong body, acknowledging that men and women have different bodies, but then they'll say that there are no biological differences between men and women. If biology is a social construct, if biology isn't real, why is it that for almost everything a trans woman does to be more feminine and a trans man does to be more masculine are based on the biological differences between men and women? To make these following situations truer, think of them as though they're happening for the first time. Trans women take estrogen and trans men take testosterone after looking at what biological women and men naturally produce. When female to male and male to female sex reassignment surgeries happen, they don't look at other trans men and trans women to know what they're changing the genitals into. They look at biological men and women respectively. Dylan Mulvaney, for example, had face feminization surgery to remove the Adam's apple, to change the jawline shape, and maybe other facial features to be more like biological women's natural look. This is the same thing for chest masculinization surgery for trans men, and voice feminization, breast augmentation, and possibly in the future, womb transplants for trans women. The reason why gender identity for children is an issue is because children are very impressionable and dumb. Children believe in Santa Claus, the Easter Bunny, the Tooth Fairy, pirates, superheroes, dragons, unicorns, wizards, vampires, zombies, magic, the boogeyman, witches, genies, talking animals, imaginary friends, monsters under the bed or in the closet, that if they eat watermelon seeds, it'll grow in their stomach. Do I need to go on? Children will believe anything, Even though it's very clear that children can't differentiate between fiction and reality, people believe this.
When our children tell us who they are, it is our job as grown-ups to listen and to believe them. That's what it means to be a good parent.
If a child believes they're a fish, would you let them breathe underwater? If a child believes they're a superhero, would you let them stop armed criminals committing a crime? If a 10-year-old girl believes she is sturdy, would you let her marry a 50-year-old man? Parents who believe that children should be listened to and believed, to put it lightly, they wouldn't be good parents. They would be bereaved parents. Because children are very impressionable, when a child says they are the opposite gender, why do they believe this? There are 3 possible answers for this. Number 1, they legitimately feel trans, feel as if they were born in the wrong body. Whether it's because of a brain abnormality, as we've discussed before or not, that's up for debate. Number 2, they feel trans because it's trendy. Kids in schools have had different popular trends or phases. For example, the 1960s had the hippie trend, the 1970s were the punk, and the 2000s were goth. What's to say that today's kids aren't going through what might be known in 10 years as the transgender phase? What if they're doing it because everyone else is, and they don't want to feel left out? If this is the case, and they do irreversible damage to themselves, it would end up being a harmful phase creating psychological issues for years, and that's if they don't self-terminate. Number 3, their parents told them who they are. Woke parents have this belief that if a child likes to dress in opposite gender clothes, it means the child is transgender. But that's not true. How do I know that? I have proof. Here's an example of a boy who liked to dress up in girls' clothes. He wanted me to keep his identity a secret for personal reasons, so we'll call him Brandon. Brandon told me that as a toddler, my parents dressed me up in my sister's clothes, but not because they thought I was transgender, as they had no idea of what that even meant at the time. They did it because it was just something fun to do or to joke around that they had 2 daughters. Brandon also said, back then, I liked wearing dresses not because I thought I was a girl or wanted to be one, but because they were different to wear compared to boys' clothes. I trust Brandon without a doubt that he's telling the truth. I believe him because I know his past, his present, his future. I know all of it. I know everything about him. I know his strengths, I know his fears, I know the things he loves, and I know how to use that love against him. I don't just know what happened to him. I was there. I lived it. I remember when I was him. If my parents had transitioned me because I liked wearing dresses, it would have been the biggest mistake ever. I am fortunate that that didn't happen, but unfortunately, we're seeing a lot of detransitioners that don't get to say the same thing. Because woke parents believe child behaviors make them transgender, they could intentionally or unintentionally treat their child as if they are transgender instead of letting the child decide who they are when they are old enough. They say they allow their child to be whatever they want, but when asked if they would let their child be right-wing, conservative, pro-life, or pro-gun, their answer is an absolute no. It's more like these parents will only allow their children to be what they want to be as long as the parents' beliefs are affirmed. Many people question if numerous trans kids are trans because their parents have indoctrinated them to believe so. Kind of like how people say vegan dogs are vegan because of the owners and not because the dog chose to be. When a vegan dog has a choice between a bowl of vegetables and a bowl of meat, then the vegan dog is not much of a vegan. The owners treat the dogs as vegan because that's what the owners want them to be. The fact of the matter is that children cannot drink, drive, vote, serve in the military, get a tattoo, hold public office, consent to sexual activity, own firearms, donate blood or organs, purchase prescription drugs, serve on a jury, and the list goes on. Parents won't even allow their children to choose basic things, like their bedtime, what to eat for dinner, or what chores to do, but supposedly, children are intelligent enough to have the choice to get hormone replacement therapies and/or sex reassignment surgery? If a child can't consent to the act of making a child, they can't consent to procedures that take away their ability. They're not old and intelligent enough to know the impact of these permanent life-changing decisions. If children are intelligent enough to make these adult decisions, they can be treated like adults. If treated like adults, their wrongdoings can be treated the same as adults in the eyes of the law. If that's the case, this 2-year-old who accidentally shot and killed his father thinking the gun was a toy gun can be sentenced for manslaughter, even though the child was not fully aware of what happened, because after the incident, he would ask for his father. A few very simple questions you can ask your child to see if they understand what you're saying are: should I spend money on computer games or this month's electricity bill, and why? The why is very important. Which is heavier, a ton of bricks or a ton of feathers? And how many numbers are in the alphabet? If they can't answer those questions correctly, then when someone asks their child, "What is your gender?" either they're repeating what their parents told them, or they don't understand what's being asked.
I wonder where he's got that from.
The fridge, you d***.
It's vital for children to know what the truth is, what reality is. One way we know what reality is through science, and science for a very long time has said that there are only two genders, but despite this, other people believe otherwise. They say there are no biological differences between males and females, but like what was outlined before, trans people go out of their way to change the differences. Biology is also why people can't change their race or identify as a different age, which is a thing for some reason. Even though this is reality, the woke insists that biology is a social construct, that sex and gender can be whatever they want it to be, and that science is wrong. When the science says something they disagree with, like basic biology, they ignore it, and when the science says something they agree with, like masks, vaccines, lockdowns, etc., they act like it's the absolute truth when they say, "Trust the science." When talking about our beliefs, the woke can believe in their gender ideology, but it doesn't mean anyone who doesn't believe it should be deplatformed, fired, harassed, etc. Why should everyone accept them for who they think they are when they don't accept who they are? You are completely entitled to opinions that are not supported by evidence, but the moment you spread that opinion as fact, you are a liar. And if you spread it as fact knowing it is not supported by evidence, you are both a liar and a fraud. If you wonder why I didn't go into detail about sex reassignment surgery, puberty blockers, pronouns, detransitioners, and more, check out this video to know what impact this woke gender ideology has on the world. If you've already watched that, YouTube recommends this one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you next time.